Well, welcome everyone. Maybe for this first part, we can take out the presentation so people can see us. That's good. Yeah, much better. So, um, David, thanks so much for being here. We was talking about this a minutes ago. This is the first masterclass we have for swimmers, and I think all of us we have um, this question all the time about swimming and the oxygen advantage, all this thing about nose breathing. While you swim, you cannot do that. So I think you will give us a lot of light about this. Please, everyone, mute yourselves so we can hear David correctly. Okay, if you can mute yourself, I will really appreciate that. So first of all, my name is Lucas. I'm the one who created this master classes program. I'm very, very proud of this because it's a way that we all can be together learning more about how to use this amazing method to help people worldwide. So we are just bringing in experts in different fields, different master instructors and instructors that teach us how to use the oxygen advantage in different scenarios. So I'm very proud of this program. I'm very grateful with Patrick that allow us to do this with no um, extra money. This is free for everyone who is an instructor, and we really need to be grateful for that because not all certifications have this opportunity. So, thank you, Emer, James, Denise, Gabby. I see one of my instructors who is a swimmer too. Um, Andy, everyone, thank you so much for being part of the Oxygen Advantage community. So, David, thank you. Please let us know more about you, the swimming, how you integrate the Oxygen Advantage, and please, the microphone is all yours. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Lucas. So this is awesome. I spent a fair amount of time prepping because that's what I do and I get obsessive about it. And then about an hour before the presentation, I just sort of thought, oh, you know what I'd really like to do is hang out and talk with this group of people. And so Lucas has led me right into going off script right out of the gate. And Lucas, because you brought up the mouth breathing, nose breathing thing, let's just go after that. It does sort of get answered as we go along, but while it's top of mind, let's just go right to it and then we'll jump into the show for as much as we want, and we'll jump out of the show when we want as well. So yeah, I want to start off by saying I do not recommend trying to nose breathe while you swim. If you've tried that, you already know the downside of it. It happens pretty fast, not pleasant. But I do think there are things you can do with swimming that still give you a net gain. And so, yes, you'll mouth breathe during swimming, though surprisingly, if you play the game, you can nose breathe during backstroke, you can nose breathe during kick sets. You can do it a little more than what you would otherwise think, but I hesitate to say do a lot of nose breathing. Other than you can nose breathe at the wall. So when you're recovering in your recover time, most people will stay in mouth breathing. You can shift over there. The beautiful thing about being in the water is you have to regulate your breathing. And so, like I said, if you play the game right, and I don't think it's that hard, you can still make it a net gain. So whatever you're losing from mouth breathing, as long as you don't carry that into the rest of your day, you'll still come out ahead. So on the screen, you see some instructions. Let me make them just a little bigger for you. What I'd love is if we would all go to this site called Mintycom. And that's going to be a place where you can answer a couple questions. It's kind of a stealth way for me to get to know you and to see who's here and why they're here. And if I'm good at what I do, I will, which sometimes I am, and then sometimes I miss the mark. But what I'll try to do is bend in the moment towards, who I know is on the call. And so there are points along the way where I can dive in a little deeper, or I can stay in the shallow end. And if I know who you are, what your experience is, and why you're here, that'll help me. So go to Minty.com, put in that code, and answer those questions.
Give me 1 second. Let me finish my lunch and then I'll take it.
Hey, David.
Yeah. Hey, Jamie.
So I've been playing around this. You inspired me to take the Oxygen Advantage courses, so to learn more. But I've been playing around with it a little bit on my own. And you mentioned the kick sets. I find the best place for me for body line and as well as swimming was backstroke kicking, and just working on nasal breathing really helped the line too. So their alignment was a big deal. So I also found that you could really trick it. I've been working on it for breaststroke, which is really tricky. So, but it can be done.
Yeah, nice. So you've been sneaking in a little nose breathing when you're on your back.
Well, it's just nice because of the pre and the post set, and if you kick backstroke, not fly kick on your back, but just backstroke, it really helps with the line, because just focusing on your nose being the highest point versus your mouth, it helps with the chin tilt too. Because if you're breathing this way versus pushing it back, it helps the body alignment too, is what I've found.
Yeah, nice. Thanks for that.
David,
Yeah.
are you talking about mouth breathing when you're exhaling or nose? I nose exhale when I'm in the water.
Right. Yeah, good point. So most all of us can still stay in nose exhaling, or we'll do a combination of the two. Yeah. Good. All right. Well, nice. 41 of you have chimed in. So when we ask the question, I'm here to learn for, we've got a good chunk of us that are here just for ourselves, bigger chunk that are here for both, and then some that are just looking at it for coaching. Fantastic. All right, most interested, this is the one I was really interested in to see where you guys are at, is, all right, so we've got a bigger chunk that's pool, then a little less that's open water only, and most of us are here for both. Okay, great. So we'll try and talk about it both. It is biased towards pool work, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have application in open water, but we'll try and make some obvious connections between the two and some things that are unique to the pool that you're not going to try and do open water. I swim for fitness, competition, and like a rock. Good to know there's some rocks out there, and I've definitely had my days where I know what it's like to swim like a rock. But yeah, so most of us here for fitness, and then a smaller chunk for competition. We'll talk about both for sure. And I write swim workouts for myself, for others, not at all. Okay. So a good chunk, most of the people are writing them for at least themselves or others. Bigger chunk, not at all. You'll have some tools to write them for yourselves. And so maybe that shifts a bit. But by the time we're done, you'll have some information on how to write them, or how to modify a set that a coach has written for you. Heaven forbid. All right, I'm comfortable with the concepts of hypercapnia and hypoxia. Yeah, all of you Oxygen Advantage instructors, you're awesome at this, so great. Most of us have a sense of that. Some of us on here, not at all. Don't worry, I'm going to fly over the top of it and at least give you the basics of it. And yeah, refreshers are nice as well. All right, last question was, I'm comfortable with the concepts of RSA and HVL. All right, so only 5 people felt like they were. 21 might need a refresher, and 18 not at all. When I explain it, it's likely that there's going to be much more people that shift left to either the yes or I just needed a refresher. It is very much what Patrick has crafted in Oxygen Advantage. It comes under a different name in some of the research literature, so I wanted to bring that forward just so people aren't thrown off by it. And what's nice about those terms, and I will get to them, they specify and hone down intermittent hypoxic training to a little narrower corner that actually has got better evidence to support it than the broad spectrum of hypoxic training in swimming. All right. Super helpful for me. Thank you for doing that. I'm going to shift the share back to the presentation. And can everybody see the Minty slide again? If I just see a couple of people give me a thumbs up, then all right, good, great. So I want to start off before I tell you a little bit more about myself and talk about a friend of mine. This is a friend of mine, Stephanie. Stephanie really is her name, and that really is a picture of her. She's given us permission to use her story. Stephanie is a very accomplished open water and pool swimmer, college swimmer, and post-college swimmer. She's one of those people who can hold hundreds on a 110 interval, which is fast, you know, so she's coming in on, 105, under 105, turning around and repeating that. So she is fast and she is strong. She recently won the Portland Bridge Swim, which is a 10-mile open water race in Portland in the Willamette River. And she came to me last August, wondering if there might be something we could do together. She knows I'm immersed in this breath world, and she's been feeling lately that she's got a bit of a performance plateau that sort of seems out of proportion to the work that she's doing. Has a realistic, image of the idea that everybody does eventually hit a plateau, or there are ceilings eventually, but just felt like something was actually kind of backsliding on her. She felt like she was losing efficiency in the water, and she was actually starting to notice some shortness of breath that seemed out of proportion for her training, her health, her condition. And so I'm going to weave the story of Stephanie as we go through this presentation. I want to take a step back for a moment and just acknowledge what most of us know, that there are three very important and very overlapping dimensions to breathing that either equate to wellness or dysfunction. And that's the biomechanical aspect of breathing, the biochemical aspect of breathing, and the psychophysiological dimension of breathing. All right, all wildly important. And so as we look to, let's say, create a profile of someone to answer the question, how are they breathing? What's going well, what's not? In Breathe Your Truth, the organization, the project that I founded, there's 7 metrics that we track. And throughout time, my guess is these will evolve. So even in this moment, I don't think these are the end all be all. But why we've picked these 7 is we feel like it gives a snapshot that talks to those 3 dimensions of breathing. And so briefly, I want to go through them right now, but I'll tell you right up front, by the time we're done, I'll provide you with a resource that gets into each one of them with a little more guidance. And so don't feel like you've got to write down feverishly as I'm describing these, and also mentally don't feel like you've got to completely comprehend it. You'll get the gist, I think, by me just going through it now. And like I say, it's going to weave through our talk for the next couple hours. So the first metric that yeah.
1 second. I make you host because my internet today is like, I'm in the mountain, but
okay.
So I cannot mute everyone. So please, we are hearing a lot of noise. So if you don't have your microphone mute, please do it. Or if maybe you can make me host for a moment, I can do it manually. So we can hear you perfectly because this information is very, very important.
Sure. And Lucas, to assign you back to host, do I just pull you up in the participants? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Then
you have the power, Lucas.
Now. Thank you. Yeah, continue. If I experience problems again, I will have to make you host again. I'm sorry, the Wi-Fi here is just today working like this. Continue, please, David. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, just give me enough heads up so I can go serve drinks or something. I feel like I need to do that as a host. All right. So yeah, let me take you through this list, these 7 metrics that we track to kind of build a profile of somebody's breathing. The first one is a Nijmegen questionnaire. This is an open source questionnaire. I will give you a link later to it, but you can find it just by doing a Google search. Nijmegen is a town in Holland, which is where it was developed. It is not the end-all be-all tool by any means. It's fallen in and out of favor in the breathing community for a while. It does have reliability and validity statistics to it to be able to detect breathing dysfunction in certain segments of the population. And it also is sensitive enough to be used as an objective outcomes measure. So I think it's worth keeping in the lineup. Easy questionnaire, score of less than 19 is considered, at least not indicating dysfunctional breathing. Nose breathing tolerance. This is really just a subjective report we get from the person we're working with. We grade it 3 phases. Number 1 is, can you maintain nose breathing just during quiet sitting? So sitting at a computer reading. The second level of it is being able to maintain nose breathing during light activity. So unloading the dishwasher, grocery shopping, moving around the house. And then the third level, the closer to ninja level with it is, can you stay in nose breathing during heavy activity? Not the heaviest activity, but at least very heavy activity. Third metric is lateral rib excursion. All right, this is really a measure of the neurological and the actual strength of the diaphragm and the flexibility of the rib cage. So what we're looking for with that, I'll just stand up and show you, is if we were to take a tape measure, which is what we do, a soft tape measure right around the lower ribs from about the 8th to the 10th rib. As somebody takes a big breath in and a big breath out, we're looking for the excursion of that. And if we had a tape measure running circumferentially, we should see 2 inches slide through our fingers of that expansion. All right, easy to do on yourself. So that's lateral rib expansion, and that gives us an idea of if the diaphragm is mechanically doing what it should. And then a very familiar one to many of you on the call is the BOLT score, the body oxygen level test. This is a timed breath hold that begins at the end of a normal breath out and stops at the first physical bump to breathe. It's not a maximum breath hold. It's just how long can you hold your breath at the end of a breath out before your body kicks you and says, take a breath in. The fifth one, same type of test. It's called the CO2 TT or CO2 tolerance test. It is actually the same as the BOLT score in terms of they're both CO2 tolerance tests. This one, a little bit more fun, I think. Sorry, Patrick, is an enormous breath in, a heroic breath in, and then you'll time the amount of time you can extend the exhale. So what you're trying to do is set a new indoor world record for the longest exhale ever. All right, it's kind of a fun one. I think it tends to be a little bit more objective. Super nice to be able to pair that with the BOLT score. So if I'm not confident with one, by all means, I'll do the other one and see if they correlate. The last 2 metrics that we track need some technology. And the nice thing is, by now you've got 5. Already 5 is going to give you a good idea of how someone's breathing. We're just greedy and we really want to get to the bottom of it. And so there's a piece of technology we use called a capnotrainer. It's a type of capnography, which is just the study of carbon dioxide. So with these last 2, we're looking to see what baseline carbon dioxide is with breathing. So with each breath in and out, we can track the exact level of carbon dioxide at the end of the breath out, which is the same as carbon dioxide in the blood. So the carbon dioxide at the end of our breath out is the same as the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in our blood, which is really what we want to find out. All right, is somebody humming along at a place where carbon dioxide is just right, or are they off? And then that last metric is, how do they recover from guided overbreathing? In other words, hyperventilating. We do 10 huge breaths in, huge breaths out. That drops carbon dioxide, and then we look to see how they recover. They should recover within 30 seconds, and if we don't, that's indicative of there being a problem. So those are 7 metrics that we look at to just get a profile or a snapshot, if you will, of where this person is. So let's take a look at what that was for Stephanie. And so Stephanie came in on an Nijmegen score of 11. Awesome. Okay, well under the 19, no concerns there. Her nose breathing tolerance was just to light activity. So when it actually came time to exercising, she would have to shift to a mix of nose and mouth. Her lateral rib excursion, 1 inch. And given her flexibility, given her physical health, 1 inch does not make sense. She should have a lot more excursion than that. My theory on why she didn't have it is just because neurologically she wasn't using her diaphragm correctly. And I'll show a little leg and skip to the end with her. Once we got her actually just using the right movement pattern, that improved right away. So it's fascinating to think that we can be limited just because of a pattern we've gotten into, not a real life musculoskeletal tightness that's there. Her BOLT score was 15, so she missed the mark of 30. Her CO2 tolerance test was 30 seconds, so she missed the mark of that test as well by about the same margin. So we can feel confident that her tolerance to carbon dioxide building up in her system is not real great. And then, not surprising, when we looked at her baseline CO2, she should be humming along at about 35 millimeters mercury of pressure of carbon dioxide, and she was at 32. Now, 32 and below is significant enough to see a 25% deoxygenation of the brain with functional MRI testing. And so anything 32 and below is significant. It's not really life-threatening, but it does make life harder. Her recovery from overbreathing, same story. It took her longer than 2 minutes to recover. She should be bouncing back much faster. So completely exciting. We've got cool things to work with on Stephanie, that if we can change these things, it's very likely she's going to feel different in the water. She's going to feel different in life. Now, this story with Stephanie really isn't that uncommon. And in fact, Kyle Kiesel, who is a university professor at University of Evansville in Illinois, and who's immersed in the breathing world as well as the functional movement screens, he and a couple other authors have identified much more breathing dysfunction in the general population than what we've otherwise given credit to. Kyle actually says that somewhere between 50 and 80% of the people walking around on the planet have got enough breathing dysfunction to actually impair functional movement testing. And so 50 to 80% of us are breathing in ways that if we could breathe better, we would be able to squat, reach overhead, just do big gross functional movements better than what we do. This notion was further solidified and by Rakimov, who is a Russian Buteyko instructor and researcher. He compiled decades of medical information to show that in the past few decades, we've really run off the rails with our breathing as a population. So normal minute ventilation, in other words, the normal amount of air we should move per minute is right around 6 liters. And right now, most of us are breathing at about 12 liters per minute. And in this case, more is not better. So by breathing more, by doubling the minute ventilation of where our physiological need is, there's a price to pay for that. And we'll talk about what that is. So now let me tell you just a little bit more about me. So by training, I'm a physical therapist. I'm an Oxygen Advantage advanced instructor. I've got breathing training through Better Physiology, Professional School of Behavioral Health Sciences, done a certification program through the Boston Center for Health Psychology and Biofeedback. And I'm a Qigong instructor, and I've got a guilty pleasure of being a Les Mills RPM cycle instructor. I've been doing this work for about 18 years, and 2 years ago, I left my day job and just jumped into this with both feet. And so I started a project called Breathe Your Truth. There's a few of us, a growing number of us, who have created this work to help people breathe better for the sake of performance and really for the sake of health. So Oxygen Advantage was a big catalyst for getting me to take another step with that. I had been using a Capno trainer for years before that. And the work that Patrick has done really helped kind of catalyze some of my thinking around that and how I moved forward with people. So huge thanks to Patrick on that. In addition to that, I'm a swimmer. I've been a swimmer on and off my life, most of on in the beginning part, and in my last couple decades on and off. And part of that is just because I haven't been happy in the water. And what I might say is, if you look at that bit of a brief resume that I've got up there, I went after all that stuff actually because I needed it. All right, it was interesting to me, but physiologically I knew something was off. So I was a modest swimmer as a kid, came up through a modest swim coach, and then swam college, and eventually swam Division I, right in middle of the pack. No great shining star, but it was a nice career. When I got to college, my times dropped dramatically, and I thought, fantastic, like finally I'm off and running. And then my second year, I really just sort of hit a peak and thought, well, this must be my plateau. Felt very tired all the time and really never got out of that. Swam the last couple of years and never did better than what I did my sophomore year in college, and really left swimming feeling a bit like, oh, well, I exhausted that and I am exhausted, and was happy to put it on the shelf for a while. What's also interesting to know is I was a backstroker. And so I had my face out of the water. I'm 100 and 200 backstroker. And I'd never really been coached on breathing. And while you can do this with all of swimming, you can especially do it with backstroke. And that's, you can adopt a very choppy, fast breathing pattern. And I'm convinced that's exactly what I did. And that ended up being the thing that started changing my chemistry and dropping my ceiling on performance. If only I had known then. And eventually that actually echoed forward into my life. And to the point that then decades later, I struggled with sleep and some other things. And so all this work I've done around breath work is really to say, you know, something in me just knew there were stones to turn over, things to do that would make my life better. And I can say that I've recently returned to the water after flirting with it a few times. And so far things are moving nicely. And I believe the guy who is actually running the swim team that I'm on, BJ Graham, is on this call as well. So BJ, thanks a ton for creating a cool environment for me to be getting back in and really testing this stuff. And that's a lot of what made me step forward to Patrick to say, hey, you know, I think I'm onto something for myself, and it's something I'd love to talk about with the group. I've been doing with runners, I've been doing with swimmers on some level, but it does feel like a very different experience to be having it happen in my own body now. So that's what I'm going to share. If I do my work well with you in the next hour and a half that we've got, what I hope you walk away with is understanding how to bring the oxygen advantage principles into the water. Even more than that, give you some tools to pick activities that have some evidence to back them, and even more important, are actually biased towards the person you're working with. In other words, really speak to the abilities of the person, because there are things out there that work for many people, and there are a lot of things out there that work for some people, and a lot that don't work for many people. And so it is an art, it is a trick to actually get yourself doing the right stuff that doesn't terrorize you, and that actually moves the needle forward and doesn't move it backwards. All right, in my work for about 18 years with people, I have completely appreciated that it is very possible to move people backwards with doing breath work. All right, if you do stuff that is beyond where their ability is, they may be able to do it on the surface, but it'll bump their chemistry back, and eventually they'll stop doing it because it doesn't feel good. So for me, that's been the big endeavor, is to find what's the right stuff at the right time. I've come to the belief that just about every breath practice out there has validity and is the right thing for somebody at some point. So how we'll get through this time, I'm going to come back to these 3 dimensions of breathing and talk about them a bit. And then we're going to go into the intermittent hypoxic training world and the relatives of it, and see if we can sift that down really fast to the stuff that makes sense in the water. And I think we can. And then we'll hit the juicy part, which is how do we play? How do we actually play in the water with this stuff? What are strategies we can use to make this work and give us the best chance for success? And then right at the end, we'll do a brief summary, and I'll give you those resources. Just in case somebody has to leave early, let me just throw a resource out now. And that's, if you go to the registration page on Breathe Your Truth, and if you're on the call, don't do it right now, don't distract yourself. But if you go to breatheyourtruth.com, register, there will be a box that pops up that has Swim True. Just click on that. It'll take you to the page that has the resources. All right. If you're not leaving early, you can forget about that. I'll remind you again at the end. So these 3 dimensions of breathing, again, 3 ways we can look at breathing, and actually 3 ways we need to look at breathing, because each one of them carries a little bit different story that when we put them together is the actual story. When we look at them individually, it's easy to get a story that will sidetrack us. So let's go after the biomechanics of breathing first. So physical therapist, this is my comfort world. You know, what we get is the diaphragm works better if we are comfortably upright and have good posture, if we've got good flexibility in our thoracic spine and our ribs, and if we've got quote unquote strength of the diaphragm and core. And I say quote unquote because in strength, over the years, I've learned to appreciate that's really about motor planning, not so much about brute strength. That's coordination, that's proprioception. That's all the things that neurologically make up a really smart pattern. It's probably a nicer and more functional definition of strength. And core is not the abs and the back muscles on the surface. It's really the kind of innate stability patterning that our body uses that doesn't fatigue, but gets disadvantaged when we are in poor postures or have injury or have pain. I want to play a brief clip of diaphragm moving because I think this is better than how I can describe, and this is a beautiful little video. The diaphragm, this very weird shaped umbrella, super fascinating, cool thing, separates our intrathoracic and our intra-abdominal area. So abdominal contents below, lungs above. As the diaphragm contracts, intrathoracic pressure becomes negative, lungs expand. They're not muscles, they just expand passively. With the diaphragm contracting, just as important as expanding the lungs, it compresses the abdominal area. So that moves abdominal contents, helps us with digestion, and a whole lot of other things. The key to this video, though, is what you're seeing right now, which is when we take a breath in and the diaphragm descends, those ribs should move posterolateral. In other words, they move out to the side, they move to the back. Now, reality is they move 360 degrees around, but the really vital motion to get are the ribs moving in the back out to the sides. So let's all stand up or sit down, whatever you'd like. I'll stand up just to show, and just feel that. So hands come to your lower ribs. If you like, you can hold here, or you can place your hands here. And just get a feel for those ribs moving. So as you take a breath in, you should feel a nice, gentle expansion of the lower ribs. And as you breathe out, they return. And if you'd like, magnify that a bit. So get a little greedy with it and take a good breath in and really feel them expand, and then really feel them return. And a couple more breaths. And now just pay attention how much is happening in your ribs versus your chest. Great, then you can have a seat. Now, if this group is like the general population, about 50% of you will notice a lot of chest breathing. All right. And the other half will feel like, yeah, you got some nice excursion down there. For those of you who felt more chest breathing than you did down here, that is most likely just a patterning issue. That's not hard to change. It just takes playing with it the right way to get more of that posterolateral rib expansion. That posterolateral rib expansion is an indication of the diaphragm descending symmetrically. You can actually train your body to belly breathe and get the front part of your diaphragm, or not even your diaphragm, just your abdominal muscles, to put your belly out and bring it back in with a breath in and out. And there's very little value to that. So if you're teaching diaphragmatic breathing for yourself or anyone else, to be monitoring what's happening with the lower ribs, much more valuable. Fascinating little bit of evidence that I came across in looking at stroke counts versus breath. This was a study done in 2009. And what the authors sort of concluded with this study was that there wasn't a great indication for doing 4 strokes per breath compared to 2, because what they noticed is that the inspiratory muscles, the diaphragm, the intercostals, fatigued more if somebody was taking 4 strokes per breath compared to 2 strokes per breath. And so what the authors felt like this was saying is, wow, yeah, no, you shouldn't do more strokes per breath because you end up fatiguing the diaphragm. And I'd like to spin that a little bit and say, oh, heck yeah, that's a reason for doing it. Because when you're training, you want to be fatiguing your diaphragm, because you will play to the neurological story. You will beef it up, at least in its pattern to move. In other words, in training, you should be fatiguing your diaphragm as well as every other muscle you're using to swim. Okay, different story when you're racing. But when you're training, we should be getting that fatigue. So if we just look at the biomechanical aspect of breathing, just that top dimension, there's sort of this story that says more is better. All right, and there is a part of that that's true. So if we can get better posterolateral rib expansion, we're getting better diaphragm excursion, we're getting bigger lung volume. We know bigger lung volume is associated with longevity. It's one of the very strong correlates to living a long, healthy life, is having good lung volume and having good diaphragm movement. I also will continue to build a case that taking more strokes per breath within a certain window is great for diaphragm strengthening, along with some other things. Okay, so let's hold that and make a shift into biochemistry. And so biochemistry, we're going to talk about carbon dioxide. And I know many of you on the call, you know this, and there are some on the call who this still is a bit of a struggle area. I am going to condense a lot of information into a few slides, so bear with me on it. I'll see if I can fast track us to it and also not bog us down too much. Important first bit to get is that carbon dioxide is what drives respiration, more so than oxygen does. So carbon dioxide is picked up, is sensed in our hindbrain, our medulla oblongata, specifically our prebunzinier complex that initiates inspiration, is very sensitive to pH and carbon dioxide. And that's what drives our drive to breathe or not breathe. Now, right alongside that, as if nature's got a bit of a sense of humor, is the fact that respiration regulates carbon dioxide. So how we breathe actually changes, for better or worse, the carbon dioxide level in our body, in our blood, very fast. So we can muck with our breathing and change our carbon dioxide very fast. Carbon dioxide is needed for oxygen release. All right, so we have to have a certain level of carbon dioxide in the blood in order for hemoglobin to let go of oxygen so that it can get out of the blood and into the cells. We're going to draw a distinction between oxygen in the blood and oxygen in the cells. All right, oxygen in the blood is what we get to see if we put a pulse oximeter on our finger. And most of us, most of the time, are going to have very good blood oxygen saturation. That doesn't mean that oxygen is getting to the tissues, and that's the crucial part. So CO2 is needed at a certain level in the blood in order for oxygen to get out of the blood and into the tissue. Low carbon dioxide traps oxygen in the blood and creates an oxygen deficit in the cells, like your muscles, your brain, your internal organs. CO2 also triggers the release of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide, this phenomenal compound, if you really had to make a best friend of any of the chemicals in our body, nitric oxide would be a great pick. Nitric oxide is a vasodilator, so it dilates our blood vessels. It helps hemoglobin bind oxygen on the front end. It works as an antiviral, an antibacterial, and antioxidant. It is this phenomenal molecule in our body that helps us with health and performance. Primarily produced in our nasal passages, also produced in the lining of our vessels. Carbon dioxide is needed at a certain level in our blood in order to release nitric oxide within the vessels. All right? Nose breathing, the other big thing, is the thing that helps get nitric oxide into our body from our nasal passages, whereas mouth breathing does not. Lastly, carbon dioxide triggers bicarbonate production. And just like nitric oxide, we want bicarbonate in our body. All right, so as CO2 rises, our kidneys hear that. And while it might take a few hours or a few days to improve bicarbonate production, they do. And bicarbonate is this buffer in our body. If we're looking at performance, it's an awesome buffer to lactic acid. All right, it's a buffer to more things than just that. But if we can build CO2 tolerance, build CO2 levels, we'll bump up our bicarbonate level, and bicarbonates will help buffer the things, the chemical things that eventually drop the ceiling on our performance. So it's one way why bumping CO2 up bumps up our tolerance to performance, to lactic acid. So that's a lot of it right there. I'm going to keep the story going and just come at it from a slightly different angle if any of that was confusing. I do want to be clear that cellular oxygen deficit is what we're trying to counteract. So yes, we want more oxygen available to the cells that need it. It's just that breathing more most of the time is not the way to get it. Breathing differently is the way to get it. If we've got a cellular oxygen deficit, for most of us, it's because we've got a blood CO2 deficit. So we need to do things that actually improve our breathing. Just refresh Rakamov's information. Most of us breathing too much. If we can actually start to, in a very strategic way, decrease our breathing, we're going to start to elevate that carbon dioxide in our blood. That'll help fix a nitric oxide deficit. And also fixes the vasoconstriction that comes from a nitric oxide deficit. Okay. So this idea of carbon dioxide and the tolerance around it, the incredibly cool part about this story is it's all programmable, it's all conditionable, all right, for better or worse. So you can be a backstroker like I was and breathe for a couple of years, train really hard and do a lot of choppy breathing. And eventually what I think I did was I dropped my carbon dioxide level because of the poor breathing pattern I was using under exertion. That carried over into the rest of my life as well. And I actually increased the sensitivity of carbon dioxide in my hindbrain. So my medulla oblongata, because it was exposed to lower levels of carbon dioxide, actually got more sensitive to any change in carbon dioxide. So then when I would exert, perform, and carbon dioxide would rise, my breathing centers would tell my body to breathe a whole lot more. I would have to shunt resources off to my diaphragm, and the ceiling starts to come down. Again, the cool part of the story is that for as much as you can condition yourself the wrong way, you can condition yourself the other way, all right? By exposing yourself to higher levels of carbon dioxide in a strategic way, you can go back to your factory reset of your medulla oblongata, and you can even take it further. So you can even improve on what your factory reset was in terms of your tolerance to carbon dioxide. Lucas could talk about that a fair amount with his free diving experience. You know, free divers are ninja level at carbon dioxide tolerance, and they do it through training of just continued exposure, exposure, exposure. So it's, you know, they are amazing examples of how far you can take this. Now, I don't believe everybody can take it as far as most good free divers can, but everybody can take it some more. Yeah, and it turns out it has very good health implications for doing that. So just to get us on track with some terms, you oxygen advantage folks, you totally get this. Hypocapnia is just a term used to describe overbreathing or carbon dioxide that's lower than what it should be in the blood. Just as hypercapnia is elevated CO2. We can use hypercapnia, we can increase exposure to get us back to factory reset, or as I just mentioned, we can leverage the system. We can do it intentionally to actually improve our tolerance to carbon dioxide. Just as we can use hypoxia, we can actually deprive the system of oxygen if we do it skillfully in a way that leverages performance. So hypercapnia, quick overview. It's all about the CO2 tolerance game, helps us allocate resources in the right direction, gives us better bicarbonate, and gives us more nitric oxide. Awesome things for performance, awesome things for health. I haven't talked about this yet, so let's let the cat out of the bag. Hypoxia also has some cool effects when done correctly, okay? Somebody sticks a pillow over your face, and I guarantee you will not get the same response. When you do it voluntarily, something different happens in your nervous system. And when you have control of it and do it under the right chemical circumstances, it actually is what's considered a hormetic stress. In other words, it's a thing you bump up against that makes you tougher. That doesn't just give you better performance, it does actually move the needle on health as well. So we can actually get a spleen contraction with hypoxia that pushes more red blood cells out into the blood system, stimulates the kidneys to produce more EPO, awesome for performance and legal when you do it this way, not legal when you inject it. Hypoxia also works on the carotid body, right around the carotid arteries, an area that's very sensitive, and that is the one main area in our body that listens to oxygen. If we threaten the carotid body by dropping oxygen, it actually produces a serotonin bump. So hypoxia work done well, guarantee it will not feel good in the moment, but it does give a later buzz. It gives an afterglow, right? It is a real biochemical shift that you get. You get a serotonin bump from playing with the system that way. So right now, we'll kind of round up the biochemical aspect of breathing. There's sort of this story emerging that feels very different than the biomechanical aspect of breathing. The biomechanical aspect of breathing sort of said, you know, the more we breathe, the more excursion we get, the more we use the diaphragm, the better. And part of that is true. We've got to bump that up against what we also know about the biochemical aspect of breathing, and that is breathing less gives us more oxygen, all right, more bicarbonates, more nitric oxide. Let's pull the psychophysiological part in to see if we can, you know, kind of land those and make sense of it a little bit more. So the psychophysiology, and I'm going to take a really complicated topic and turn it into one slide, all right, which is an incredible injustice. But I want to at least start to get our minds thinking this, because I don't think we have to be psychologists to get this. I think it can help, but I don't have a psychology background as much as I have played in that world. But you get the basics of it, and you can change it for yourself, and you can help change it for other people. let's acknowledge that while I've just made carbon dioxide really seem like the good guy, carbon dioxide is the most profound driver of panic and fear in our body for good reason, right? If carbon dioxide does exceed certain levels, it kills us. So our body has this built-in mechanism that if we're not ready for it, it will send our body into the most profound panic because the presence is rising. And if it does that, even if it doesn't kill a person, all right, which generally we're not doing this with this work, it still will light up the autonomic nervous system as though a really bad threat just happened. And if you light up the autonomic nervous system or get the person in sympathetic overdrive and fight or flight, you'll undermine the positive effects we're trying to get with this kind of work. And so the key is really to approach it like a dolphin, all right? Just staying with the water theme of curiosity, of levity, of humor, and to stay light about it. Because this can easily turn into, as I referred to earlier, mental terrorism, physical terrorism. And the game is really to do it in a way that is not that. And so as I move forward and we talk about actual practices that you can do, if you haven't done them, the first time you try them, if you're like me, you get about half the way into it, 3/4 of the way into it, and you have to back out because you've gone overboard and you have felt that panic and you haven't been able to manage it. So the trick is you step in it incrementally and you play the story in your head that this is good work. And the lighter I can be about it, the better it works. All right. Lucas, the free diver, would likely equate that to saying, you know, they know that the more they can turn the parasympathetic nervous system on and stay in this place of equanimity, this place of being relaxed, this peaceful place, that's where you've got the chance, you know, to move forward. So as much as we approach it with striving and with anxiety, it will undermine any progress we can make in this world.
Yeah, I love you mentioned the dolphin, because when we are in the water, we are actually using our diving reflex, mammalian diving reflex, and that go very, very deep in your nervous system. So that's why we free dive, because it's like getting high just with the water and breath holding. So at the beginning, it's very stressful, but after that, after some practices, is peace. You know, some very deep meditation. So it's very nice that you bring the dolphin.
Yeah, Lucas, I'm going to depend on you to help me experience that. And yeah, help me with that. If you were on earlier, you probably heard me say that I'm so fascinated with free diving, and it also scares the bejesus out of me. So I sit there and I think, oh, I'm never going to do it. And then I'm like, oh, I think I should try it. So one of these days.
I can help with that anytime.
Okay, good. Do I have to go to Spain for that? If so, that's probably an incentive. All right.
I'm in Colombia, actually.
Oh, all right. All right.
Yeah.
So that rounds out the 3 dimensions of breathing, I hope. We've addressed the biomechanical aspect, the psychophysiological, and the biochemical aspect of breathing. And now let's jump into the world of intermittent hypoxic training and the relatives thereof. If you look at the literature of intermittent hypoxic training in swimming, it will get disheartening really fast, because there is a lot of literature out there saying there is no positive effect, okay? There is still a significant body of information out there saying there is a positive effect, and there's certainly a lot of stories of people doing really well with it, and there are a lot of stories of people feeling they got absolutely nothing from it. Most of the research done on intermittent hypoxic training in swimming is done at altitude or in conditions where they were manipulating the percent of oxygen available to people. What Juarez did is take intermittent hypoxic training and got a whole lot more specific with it, and actually did a brilliant research project in it that has sparked, you know, many others that now just continue to support it, and refined intermittent hypoxic training actually to a place that he doesn't even refer to this as intermittent hypoxic training, but I think for our purposes we can still refer to it as intermittent hypoxic training, where our goal is to get hypercapnia as we're playing with a decrease in oxygen level or hypoxia. And the term that he uses for it is that last one of the question that I gave you, which is the RSA VHL. And what that is repeat sprintability and voluntary hypoxia at low lung volume. Putting that in English, what that means is doing intense work, because the research around intermittent hypoxic training has shown that you can't just, let's say, swim in a place of hypoxia and get the performance bump. But if you do intense work under hypoxia, you've got a better chance of it. What Warren said and found out was also, if you do it at a low lung volume, in other words, do it at the end of a breath out, you have even a better chance of getting good effect. So these two things were crucial to actually hypoxic training in swimming being successful, was that you do it while you're sprinting and you do it at the end of a breath out. All right, two big threats. All right, but that is what if you may see this in literature, and I don't want you to be too distracted by it. It is intermittent hypoxic training, and it is what Patrick has talked about, and it's what he does. I'm going to flash to the shark fit activity soon. If you haven't drawn the parallel already, you'll see that that's exactly what shark fit is. But so that's the RSAVHL. The research that was done after that in the swimming world actually shows how, it gives an example of how this plays out in the water. And I'm just going to put it all up on the screen. So Tricot with Warrens did a follow-up study that showed to get the physiological bump that we're looking for in hypercapnia and hypoxia. And how it plays out is to do 2 sets of 16-25. So in a 25-yard pool, that's one length. All right, 16 times you're doing that one length. The first 15 yards is a sprint. The second 10 is just a coasted in. The coasted in, though, you still have to make it back to do the interval on 30 seconds. So these were 16-25s on 30 seconds. That gives a work to rest ratio of about 1 to 2. So you've got twice as much rest time as work time. There has been follow-up research done looking at a 1 to 5 work rest ratio, and it showed no biochemical effect. So somewhere between the 1.5 and the 1.2 is likely the number. Right now, we at least have the beginning level of evidence to say the work rest ratio of 1 to 2. In other words, work for 1, rest for twice as much time. And then again, the key is that that sprint is done at the end of a normal breath out. It is not emptying your tidal volume. It's not emptying your lungs. It's just as Patrick describes it in the Oxygen Advantage. It's just the end of the normal breath out, plug your nose, take off running. In this case, take off swimming, all right? And take off sprinting. You do 1 round of that, 20 minutes, you'll repeat it again. You can do other swimming in between. So if you're weaving this into a workout, you'll then go on, hopefully do things that are a little bit on the light end, take a bit of a break, but keep moving, keep swimming. And then you come back and you do that second one. All right. This is a lot. I mean, this is, to do the 2 sets of 16-25s on 30 sprinting is hard enough by itself in the middle of a workout, but then to do it in hypoxic is a big deal. So let's acknowledge that. It's doable, but it's, not to be taken lightly. Just a little bit more on dosing, because I'm guessing that question is out there, which is how many times a week should we do this? And I have not seen the research that says it's specifically in the swimming world and on that protocol, but there is a bit of research out there by some smart Italians that identified it in the running world. All right, and what they were looking for was, at what point of hypoxia do you create reactive oxygen species, which is the downside of too much hypoxia. So you can expose your body to too much hypoxia and actually start to create a biochemical cascade that is bad for you. All right, generally referred to as reactive oxygen species. I don't know how they came up with that name, but there it is. In the running world on dry land, that was determined that at about 5 days a week of doing a protocol like this, about half the people started to produce that biochemical effect. And so what they recommended was 3 times a week. 3 kept everybody clear. So somewhere around 3 times a week should be about the max that you do the work that I just described. All right, not necessarily the increasing your exposure to carbon dioxide. I'm talking specifically about the max effort with the breath holding and the intensity that I just gave you the dosing for. Okay, so different than just regular good breath control. So somewhere in that 1 to 3 times a week. I put the 1 in there because mentally it's exhausting. It's a challenge, and so you're going to be playing this game of doing it enough to get a biochemical bump, but not doing it enough that you're terrorizing yourself. And there is evidence out there saying that to even do it once a week, once every 2 weeks, moves the dial forward if you've packaged it in the dosing that I presented. I want to just take a break a moment and just say, I realize that chat is filling up. I'm going, if it's okay, I'm going to keep rolling. We'll take a break. We'll have time at the end for questions, and I'll hit them then. If you feel like you've got a question and you just can't move on from it, by all means, unmute yourself and jump in. That's completely okay. All right, so like I said, this is very much like Shark Fit. The Oxygen Advantage instructors know this routine that I just described in the water. On dry land, it's done as breathe easy at the end of a breath out, plug your nose, begin to run, pick up the pace as you feel a strong urge to breathe, continue to run when you can't take it anymore, drop back to a walk, 6 micro breaths. Those micro breaths take the tension off the diaphragm. They don't make it comfortable. It still is very uncomfortable, but you're not going to fall over. You make it through your 6 micro breaths, and then you go easy. You repeat that 10 times. All right. So very similar to the intensity that was described by Trincott and Warren's as in terms of what to do in the pool. Now, Patrick in Oxygen Advantage took Warren's work and I think made it even a little smarter. All right, and that's, he said, yes, let's do the repeat sprintability. Let's do the voluntary hypoxia with low lung volume. And let's start to bend it to people who are actually ready for it. All right, so he built in this ability part of it. And part of that is using the metric of the BOLT score. So he recommends people are at a certain level of BOLT score before they move on to this activity, as well as having good posture and some other things. With the Breathe Your Truth project, I've taken Patrick's lead, and I've tried to go even a little bit further with that. And that's what I want to present to you next in terms of the how we play. So right now I'm going to just take a pause, and sorry, I'm not going to look at the chat yet. I see there's 26 chat messages in there, and I'm dying to look at it, but it'll distract me too much. But let me pause for a moment and just see, does anybody have a question that they feel like we don't want to go forward from until we get it answered?
David, Jamie Myers.
Hey, Jamie.
Hey, so on the 15-yard sprint, so some people aren't going to be able to complete 15 yards on a 2-1 ratio. Would you recommend, I found that the distance swimmers could actually go more of a ratio, but again, anyways, is it the 15 yards on the test, or is it the 2-to-1 rest ratio that's more important?
Yeah, it's a good question. My guess is it's the 2-to-1 work ratio to a certain extent. In other words, it has to be intense. If that distance draws out too much, you're not actually playing the intensity game that you need to get the biochemical bump. But my guess is you probably could do it as a 50. Okay, you could play with it that way. Is that what you're thinking, Jamie?
No, what I found was the distance-oriented kids could go more like 12, 13 seconds to the whole 25, and the sprinters actually get 8 to 10 seconds, was the actual ratio for their recovery. But I just I would never go a whole 50. No, I'm just talking about, was it, it says 15 yards, but some people aren't even going to make 10 seconds, 15 yards, and so that was the real question. Would you really want to hit the 10-second mark? It's the most important thing, or is the 15 yards the most important thing?
Yeah, so they actually get, they get 30 seconds for the 25. And so you're looking at that first 15, probably taking 10 seconds, and then they've got 20 seconds to coast in, do a nice slow open turn, and go again.
Okay.
My guess is that the hard part is, can you actually make it 15 at the end of a breath out when the intensity starts getting big? That's where you'll see people start to fail. And if they don't make it, they likely still will get a bump. They're stressing their system in the way that they want. So those first couple, to make 15 at the end of a breath out, sprinting, most people are going to make it. By the time you get to 10, a lot of people are going to be struggling to make 15 yards at the end of a breath out, still maintaining the intensity of a sprint. Okay, just tell people all you're trying to do is you're just trying to do it. You've obviously bumped yourself up against your biochemical wall in the way that you want to.
Can you explain the breath? Can you explain the breath out after that intensity in the water? The recovery breaths?
Yeah, I don't know that the researchers identified it other than just you start to breathe. And so when you're done with that 15 yards, then just breathe normally, getting into the wall, breathe how you want. When you get to the wall, breathe. If you're, really want to push yourself, you could say stay in nose breathing, but it wouldn't surprise me if most people do have to go to a mix of nose and mouth when you're playing this intensive a game. Was that your question?
Yeah, would you do breathe in nose, breathe in mouth, out nose, or just in and out mouth, or in and out nose, or is there no anything goes?
Yeah, well, the best is in and out nose. As
Okay.
the intensity rises, though, then the next best is in through your nose, out through your mouth. And when the shit really hits the fan and you can't take it, you're in and out through your mouth. But yeah, ideally, nose only. But I wouldn't hold people to that. I would rather them hold the intensity of breath holding with that 15 and the speed than keeping nose breathing at the wall in this case.
Just want to confirm that on the sprint, the 15 yards, you're not breathing for the 15 yards. After that, you can resume breathing for the last 10.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you're exactly right. So that's a face down, looking at the bottom of the pool, no breathing for the first 15, and then the 10, you get to breathe. Thank you.
Can you do a backstroke?
Yeah, I think you could. Just hold your breath.
It's much harder because the air is so tempting.
Yeah, it's right there in your face.
It is.
No one's going to know. All right, great. So let's jump into what I feel like is the juicy part, the exciting part for me, the how we play. So there's a model that we use with Breathe Your Truth that as time goes on, I appreciate this model more and more. And while I may not always be good at doing it for myself, I get the importance of it. And that's to look at this work, not in a linear fashion. In other words, don't look at phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 3 being the end, the thing to get to. All right, not linear that way. How we look at it is we play this game of going from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3, only to get back to phase 1 and have a more profound experience. And so it's a cyclical pattern. We have fun playing in the performance world. There's a sexy part of that. There's a fun part of it. But I think life health really happens at that phase 1. All right. And so phase 1 is this place where we build awareness. It's the remedial place if we're struggling with it, but it is the place we come back to and then have a very different experience in phase 1. And I think it's the magic of this work is to continue to come back to that place of the beginning and now just have a new experience in that place. So this is not about getting to a place where you have the ability to work hard and you work hard and that's the end of the story. All right. We take a side trip to a place where we work hard and stress the system to be able to come back to a place of awareness and have a deeper experience. And so in general, that's the game we're playing. And I think if we hold that, it shapes how we play, especially when we get to phase 3, in a way that keeps us more like a dolphin. So let's get into the specifics of that. For the sake of a diagram, now I'm going to flatten it out and put it in a linear form, but I want you to hold that circular idea in your head. Phase 1, what we're doing there, someone who's really struggling with their breathing, this is where we stay, and we just do practices that improve awareness of the breath. And then in phase 2, that person a little bit more like Stephanie, we're going to start to do some what we call comfort plus breath holding. In other words, we're going to breath hold within comfort zone, and we're going to find the edge of that zone. And we might even flirt with the edge of that zone. We're not pushing hard, but we're playing with the edge, with the bandwidth that we have with breath holding. And this we'll call health and fitness. All right. This is the stuff that we just do. If we play in this world on a regular basis, it moves the needle on health and fitness. All right. This is primarily the world that I'm swimming in right now. Phase 3 then is where we bring the real challenging stuff in, the one that I just described, where we know we've got the solid research to say when we play this way, dose it this way, with this intensity, with this mindset, we get that biochemical cascade that we're going for that bends us towards peak performance. So those are the phases that we delineate. All right. And this helps us pick the right activity for where a person is. We then pull in those 7 metrics that I introduced you to earlier. And we've got this grid. I'm not going to populate the grid right now, but I will by the time we're done. And I'll show you those things that fall in here. And this is a resource that I'll give to you. It's on the website. You can download the PDF that has this. So again, don't feel like you've got to write feverishly. Just sort of kind of take in the concept of it. But we use those 7 metrics to help us see where someone lands, to then help us pick the right activity based on where they are. 2 of those metrics you'll need some technology for, but you've got 5 of them that you don't need technology, and that likely is going to get you to be right most of the time with people. So let's cut to what the activities are. So in phase 1, all right, someone who has scored in that first column, the stuff we're going to do in the water are things like nose breathing, recovery on the wall. So when they're done with the set, they'll stop their mouth breathing, they'll come and they'll nose breathing. What I generally tell people is nose breathe 70% of the time. The downside of a swimming workout is you got your face in the water and you don't get a chance to build camaraderie with the folks you're swimming with. And the wall is really where you do it. And so I'm hesitant to take that social part away from people completely. And so what I say is at least be a good listener. A lot of the times in the water, you can listen with your mouth shut, talk when you need to, but then go back to nose breathing. So nose breathing at the wall as much as you can. And then the next one is count your strokes per breath. All right, we're not manipulating it. We're not saying take X number of strokes per breath or number of breaths per length or per 50. We're just saying start to become aware of how often you breathe. All right, don't change anything, just watch it. And then to that same effect, when kicking with a kickboard on your stomach, face in the water. All right. It isn't to restrict breathing. It's just to make you aware of when you do take that breath. All right. If you're on your back, no kickboard, then you're just paying attention to when you do breathe. So very simple. Phase 1 activities in the water. And like I mentioned, we use this as the remedial start. And also when you've taken a trip around the circle and you've done phase 3 type things, to come back and do these activities, there is something incredibly nourishing and nice about them. All right, and so I don't want to build a culture around phase 1 as it being remedial. I think just the opposite. It's a great starting point and it's a very profound place to play, as simple as it is. So phase 2, this is our comfort plus breath holding. And so these are, again, very important. Stay in nose breathing during recovery. Here, we're going to do sets where we ask people to maintain a comfort plus breathing pattern. In other words, that for a lot of people at this phase is going to be 5 strokes per breath. Okay. Doesn't have to be the entire workout. I don't think that that's helpful, but to take a set that has some importance and commit to staying in 5 strokes per breath and change your intensity based on your ability to do that. In other words, if you hit a place where you can no longer maintain, instead of going to breathing more, drop the intensity back. And so you'll commit to whatever that comfort plus breathing pattern is. Those of you who have played the game of getting yourself to be able to tolerate nose breathing, you know this happens, where it doesn't take long before your body figures it out. If you cave to it, you could still figure it out and your body will get there, but you figure it out, your body figures it out a whole lot faster if you commit to it and drop the intensity down to match. Okay. Then pull sets are awesome time when you grab that pull buoy, put it between your legs, put on paddles if you use them. That's a great time to actually focus on your breathing. You get a little support, a little help from the pull buoy holding you up. Most people can push their breath holding pattern a little bit more. So if you were doing 5s, during a main set commitment, when you do a pull set, you can usually do a 5-7 pattern. And so what we mean by that is you're taking 5 strokes on the first 50, second 50, you'll go to 7, and then on the next 50, you come back to 5. So if you've got a 200 pull, you're going to do the first 50 as a 5, second one as a 7, then come back to the 5. So what you're doing is flirting with the edge. And so you're taking your top of your comfort zone, then you're nudging it just a little bit, and then you're coming back. And so you're nudging and coming back. The idea is that you have to work a little bit. Mostly you just have to be mindful, and you don't get to swim at a breakneck speed. You've got to be really efficient with how you're swimming to be able to pull that off. That's the challenge we want people to feel in phase 2. Also super helpful to do sets where you commit to no breathing in and out of the turns. Every swimmer has heard that they should do it. And most swimmers struggle to do it during workout. They'll only do it when they're feeling pretty fresh or they're pushing something really hard. But to actually take a set and say, the commitment here is actually no breathing in and out of the turns. Let the breathing between the flags be what you want, but no breathing in and out of the turns. And then kicking. You can take that kick and regulate your breathing with it. So usually what we're saying is 10 beats for flutter for every 1 breath, 4 beats of a dolphin kick for every breath, and 2 cycles for breaststroke for a breath. They all equate to about the same. So you're breathing based on what your feet are doing. It just keeps you from breathing unabashedly, gets you in a pattern, not meant to be super hard, just again, bring you a bit to your edge and keep you mindful about the process. We'll go to phase 3 and then I'll break again for any burning questions that are keeping your mind from absorbing information. So phase 3 stuff, that is the set that I put up earlier, the one that's got the good evidence to support it. Still definitely includes nose breathing recovery at the wall. Here you might do a maintain, challenge that's either a 7 or a 9. Someone who's hitting all the criteria for phase 3, 7 is starting to feel comfortable and they're not afraid to throw in an occasional 9. Pull sets, they're flirting with 7, 9, and may even go 9, 11 with them. The key one, that 2 sets of 16 times 25, if you want to, hold to something that we know there's good evidence to say, this gives the biochemical cascade that we're looking for. Also a chance to hit power training. And so it is one of the key things that these researchers identify is if you're dropping intensity just for the sake of getting more strokes per breath, eventually you'll lose the game because you're not going into the anaerobic pushing glycogen stores in the muscle, really, taxing that intensity. And so back the distance way down, do it at the end of a breath out and hit that intensity hard. And now you get the whole glycolysis process to improve. Okay. And then no breathers. I love these no breathers, these 25s, not nearly as hard as the shorter ones that you actually get to breathe during. These no breathers that I recommend at the end of a workout, I call them Zen 25s. The game here, not power, the game is actually efficiency. So what you're actually going to do is find that speed that doesn't waste energy and also gets you to the end swiftly. All right, and that tends to be a very Zen place. That's a nice speed that feels good. And they're done as no breathers. Usually when you start them, the first couple will feel a little hard and then your body settles. When you get that response, you know you're on the right track. All right, it's not that it gets easy, but you feel something and you settle and it definitely gets easier. And so those are no breathers that you get to take a good breath in and push off. So breath in, hold, push off. The challenge set, that's at the end of a breath out, normal breath out. This set, the Zen 25s, these are done with a breath in. All right. You'll feel at the end of doing this that your body settles really nicely, which is why I tend to put that at the end of a workout. All right. It's a great way to just clean up your stroke, get efficient, and bring your mind back into focus and kind of leave it clean. All right. I'll pause for a moment and hit some questions.
How much rest between those no breathers at the end of the workout?
Yeah, it depends on the swimming ability, but someone who is versed in the competitive world, so was either a good high school swimmer or a college swimmer, you're going to be okay doing them on 30. This one, different though than the previous set that had that, the research saying, stay closer to 30. I have no problem going longer on this one. Give yourself recovery time. Like I say, you're looking for that effect of maybe the first 2 feeling a bit hard, but then it getting easier. And so if you don't feel it drop and get that little bit easier, take a little more rest. If you get that drop on 30 and you felt like it got a little easier, you're on the right track. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
You bet. You bet.
What about eating pre or post, for swimming? Because like when I go, I'll do the swim, I'll swim 1,000 yards. I try to keep my breaths at 6 breaths every 50 yards. and then I do no breathers afterwards, but I can only do about 3. But does it make a difference? Because I usually swim fasted. So does it make a difference? Would there be something you recommend? Maybe eat a little bit, or does that make a difference at all?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is just my mom saying, don't eat an hour before you swim. I think, and then, yes, yeah, you shouldn't eat much, but I know that's not actually what you're asking. I don't really know the answer to it, but I appreciate that it can be different for different people. I swim better fasted. I know a lot of people who do, but I also know people who do better having a banana before practice, doing something that just gives them a little bit of a sugar bump, and they do better. So I'm going to give you an unofficial answer of, I think you try it and you see what feels better for you.
My feeling would be, I always swim fasted, and I've come across a little bit of research on this, that, I mean, if you're using ketones for energy, then you're going to be producing less carbon dioxide, and so there's going to be less pressure to breathe. So for me, it's the breath holds in general much easier when fasted.
Yeah, interesting.
I had a question. I'm not a particularly accomplished swimmer. I've been doing. I swim in a 20-meter pool, and I tend to. I'll swim for an hour and a half, and I'll generally do about a length a minute underwater, and breathe for generally about six or 7 breaths in between. Now, is that so? I guess those would be like your 25 length no breathers. Do you think that would be beneficial? Would I be better to just finish with that?
Yeah, the purist in me says it'd be interesting to look at how you do with the other metrics. If we were to actually look at that profile of 7 metrics, because what we might say to you, Ben, is that you're at a place where you can push that, you can tighten that interval a little bit, push the intensity a bit, and get more out of it, and not even worry about making the whole thing as a no breather. Or we might look at you and say, no, we should keep you in that green zone, in that kind of comfort holding. And if so, then I think what you've described will work, because it is going to bump up CO2, and you're playing that game of just exposure of increased CO2. We may also look at you, let's say, and if we saw your baseline carbon dioxide as being very low, or we saw your BOLT score, your CO2 tolerance as being low, I might even back you away from what you just described and said, no, actually make the whole thing easier, and just be mindful of what you're doing with your breath and stay on the move a little more.
Okay,
so what I'd encourage you to do is, if you don't know where you are on those 5 metrics that you can do on your own, look at the resource that I'll give you a link to at the end, and see where you fall if you're in that kind of gray, green, or blue zone, and then play accordingly.
Great.
Either play harder or play less.
Cheers.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey, David.
Yeah.
David, what you mentioned about for the 10 to 25 no breathers, to do that on the inhale, to hold the breath and do it.
Yeah.
What's the reason for doing it on the inhale?
Yeah, there's a couple reasons. One is it's just more comfortable, and you're going to feel okay getting to the end. Mm-hmm. And this is about efficiency and actually sort of feeling good in the water. The other part is, and the Taoists have described this for a long time, and there is emerging research. Different things happen in our autonomic nervous system when we hold our breath at the end of a breath in versus the end of a breath out. And both of them are actually good when done in the right context. When we hold our breath at the end of a breath in, we get an initial bump in the sympathetic nervous system, and then our parasympathetic nervous system emerges even stronger and becomes dominant. So even though a breath in is generally associated with sympathetic nervous system, when we take a good, healthy breath in and hold, sympathetic first, but then parasympathetic outplays it. The reverse happens with the breath out. Breath out, our parasympathetic nervous system has momentum. It's the first thing to dominate, but it isn't long after before sympathetic now is actually driving the show. So think of it just as a challenge to your autonomic nervous system to play both ends of the spectrum.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
David, I got a quick question.
Sure.
So with humming and nitric oxide, in your
Yeah.
nose, is that something that you've looked at all? And other one would be related to Moxie sensors as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I should integrate humming into this. I just finished a piece on COVID, and that's a real big player for that because we know with post-COVID recovery, we really want to do everything we can to bump up nitric oxide for that health benefit. And there's been, be it a little bit scat, there is some research out there that shows that humming can increase nitric oxide production 15-fold. That's huge. There's nothing that we know of that bumps nitric oxide production up that much. I'll tell you that when I drive to swim practice on my own, I frequently go to swim practice with my sister, who may be on this call as well. And I don't do it with her in the car because that would be awkward. But if I'm by myself, I hum for 10 minutes on the way to practice. I know at least the science says that bumps up nitric oxide production in my nasal passages, bringing it into my lungs. Hemoglobin now has better oxygen, access to oxygen. You can definitely integrate that into swimming. And we've played with that in the water where you do an exhale that has an audible tone to it. So you're actually humming the exhale. And when I hum and exhale and swim long course, I can start to hit 11s and 13s for strokes per breath. So I think it does help. I'd probably put it in that, phase 2, phase 3 world. So thanks for that, Jamie.
Can I add something about the nitric oxide? You can read this research of John Lundberg. He's like the biggest exponents of the nitric oxide. He had beautiful research around it. I hum before my practice, freediving practice and competition. What I read is like you produce like 20 parts per million of nitric oxide in your nose when you breathe normally. But when you hum, you improve that 17 times when you're doing humming. So it's amazing seeing that, and I think nitric oxide is pretty new. So we are just like making all the discoveries around this gas. So humming definitely improves our performance in any kind of sport, I think.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Jamie and Lucas. That's a good thing to bring up. If I give this talk again, I'll drop nitric oxide humming in there. Good.
I also have some level 4 things you could add later.
Oh, all right. Anyone who wants to stay on for level 4 after this, Jamie will guide us through that. Okay, so let me do what I promised I would do, and that's give you the data that populates this graph. I'm not going to go through this line item. Mostly I just want you to know that this resource is available. There is not awesome science to support what you see. All right, there is a lot of experience to support this. And these are numbers that there's a small group of us that have bent and tweaked, for the last 15 years. And that's sort of what gets us here. And what we base it on is when we see somebody go backwards. And so when we are doing this work with people, monitoring carbon dioxide in their breathing, and we start to see them tank, which seems to be the first thing to go backwards. Before we'll see them start failing with Bolt, and before we'll see them start failing with CO2 tolerance test, we'll start to see baseline carbon dioxide dropping. And so when we see that drop, we generally think that, we got too greedy, we're giving stuff that's too hard, we back it off, we make it easier, and they pick up again. So it's, and that's not peer-reviewed awesome science, but it's at least better than nothing. That's what has gotten us to these numbers. Likely they will tweak as time goes on. What I would like to do is show you exactly where Stephanie's metrics fell. So Stephanie came in at this. So she had two things that were in phase 1. Her baseline carbon dioxide was at 32 millimeters of mercury of pressure. And so that put her at, below the 33. So that gave her a phase 1. She also, it took her longer than 2 minutes to recover. So phase 1. Most of her stuff fell in phase 2. And then she had the Nijmegen score that put her into phase 3. And this is how most people will show up, is they're going to be a mix of phase 1, 2, 3, but you will see them migrate towards 1. So if you look at where most of her stuff is, she fell in that phase 2. And so that's where we started. Now, don't think for a second that we're saying you can only stay in your lane and only do phase 2 type activities. you'll have gut hunches, and many times they'll be right. You can borrow from a phase ahead. So you can pull a phase 3 activity in and see if it helps nudge the story. Just as you could have somebody showing up largely as a phase 2 person, but just have a sense that phase 1 still is a good place for them to play. All right. This just gives you a starting point, a place to pick something where you'll have a better chance of being right. And then you'll play based on intuition and how they're actually doing with it. You'll also play based on one other really important thing, and that's their interest. And so when I look at this for myself, and as I did with Stephanie, we sat down and we talked about, theoretically what stuff falls in there. And I shared a lot more with Stephanie than I did with a lot of people, just because I know Stephanie well. And when I asked her where she actually wanted to play, was it more just building awareness, or was it hitting the health and fitness, or are we going for peak performance, which was sort of part of what she asked for in the beginning. What she said is, no, actually, I'd really like to hang more in the health and fitness, which was great because that actually matched where her data was. But keep in mind that people won't always want that. And there are going to be some people who really want to go for the peak performance, even if their metrics aren't there. And what I say for that is try it. But watch the metrics, watch for signs that things aren't moving in the right direction, just as honor that person who looks at the lineup that's in the awareness category and says, no, that's actually really more what feels like a fit for me. Again, losing that story that the awareness stuff is the remedial stuff. Appreciating that as we cycle back around after the peak performance, we have an experience in that awareness category that tells us it's anything but remedial. So just to hit a summary of why we're doing breath work and swimming, we are definitely trying to get the training effects of altitude at sea level, because at sea level, people can push performance more. The drag about altitude is you don't get to stress your muscles like you can at sea level, at least most of us mortals. We are training for aerobic and anaerobic performance. We can bias that if we've got a goal biased towards one more than the other. If we just want aerobic performance, we're spending more time in that phase 2 kinds of stuff, or that even phase 1. If we want the anaerobic part, we're playing in phase 3. We're trying to get diaphragm strengthening. We're trying to improve lung volume. We're building CO2 tolerance. We're decreasing the respiratory drive. We're bumping up bicarbonate production, becoming better buffers. We're getting better nitrogen oxide release, more red blood cells, hopefully stimulating the production of EPO from the kidneys, better serotonin. We're going for mental resiliency and focus. And if we do this work well, we inspire people and we don't freak them out or freak ourselves out. I've got to mention race day at least once. So just a teeny bit on that. Race day is different if you are doing either open water races or you're doing swimming pool races. All right, the game shifts. You're essentially going to cash in. You've done your work, you've got your deposits in the bank, and now you're going to cash in on them. That might mean breathing more if you feel better with that. So here you're trying to not build an oxygen debt, and you're trying to not let carbon dioxide rise. And so fair game to breathe more than what you did in training. What you'll have to decide for yourself is don't breathe more at the expense of your biomechanics, of your form, and of your efficiency. The more you do this kind of work in practice, the more efficient you're going to get at more strokes per breath. And so you'll have to be finding that sweet spot of your number of breaths per stroke that still keep you efficient and good form. Right? Katie Ledecky is a good example of someone who can breathe a lot in a distance event and not lose form. Most people can't do that. If they're breathing a bunch, they're taking a hit every time they turn their head and take a breath. There's more water drag, their butt sinks. So there's a cost to breathing more in swimming in a race for most people. There is a phenomena we know in the running world that I'm just going to mention. I won't get into it too much, but you can use that shark fit activity or that 12-16 or those 16-25s. I don't recommend doing a full 16. I would recommend just 5. Again, we know this in the running world. You could do 5 of those 15-meter-yard sprints, breath holds during warm-up and get a biochemical bump that doesn't actually physically tax your body. And so it's a way to shake up the snow globe and to get a biochemical cascade going in your favor 15 to 30 minutes before an event. All right. There is evidence out there saying that runners can do this, and it does increase performance for those who are comfortable doing it. I would never recommend somebody do this if they have not gotten used to it in practice and they know how it feels in their body. All right. People who do this in practice already have an intuitive sense of how many they need to do to get for this to right before performance in order to get that bump. But just know there is some evidence out there saying you can do this in the minutes before the starting gun goes off and get a bump. All right, so let's come back to Stephanie and wrap up the story with Stephanie. So what we actually did with Stephanie was, number one, had her 1 day a week workout on her own. All right, because she swims with an intense group of friends. All right, but when they are in the water, they're moving. And they spend a lot of time simply trying to keep up with either their own previous performance or the person in front or behind them. And so it pulled her out of the water so she could back intensity off to let her breath be the most important thing she was working on. She was most comfortable with a 2, breathing every 2. 3 was a stretch for her, but she committed to playing with 3-5. She stayed in nose breathing during recovery. She mostly just does flutter kick with and without a board. So she committed to the 10 beats per breath. And we did some biofeedback work with her, just getting her baseline CO2 up. And so what that looks like is it's a funny little device we hook into a computer, relatively small, has a nasal cannula that goes on, lets us measure CO2 in the moment. So we can give her feedback. She can actually play in the moment with what things bump CO2 up and what things drop CO2. And what's awesome about the technology is it frequently is not intuitive. All right. And so telling somebody to breathe low and slow is exactly the right thing to tell them, but what they will do is frequently not right. All right. Most people will overshoot it and then pay for it. In other words, they'll breathe too slow. They'll minimize their breath too much, and they'll get a temporary spike in CO2, and then they'll drop. All right. Because their sympathetic nervous system has jumped in, and now their breath volume is increased. The rate is still slow, and they think they're breathing less, but their volume is actually decreased. We get to see that in real time. And when we see that, what we say is, okay, not so much. Find an easier place. All right. So just a little bit slower, just a little bit less. And they play until they hit that sweet spot. Okay. I don't think the technology is absolutely required. I think it's incredibly nice. All right. I would love to put it on the shelf. I don't love the idea of being tied to a computer screen for even brief periods of time. But after using it for coming up on about 18 years, I do still like having it. So I feel remiss to not mention that. The swim workout that she did, I'll hit some of the highlights here. And she had a couple of workouts that she did, but this was the one she started with, and it was the one she came back to the most. It's a relatively simple workout. It's about 2,500 yards, I think just a little shy of that, which is way less than what she would normally train. In a workout, she's normally hitting 4,000 to 6,000. But in this 2,000, I think 400 it is, she felt like she got it, what she needed out of it. And so this is where we equilibrated. So she started out with a 300 swim, which was just slow enough to stay in comfortable 5 strokes per breath, which meant it was really pretty slow for her. She was encouraged to goof around a bit and really just enjoy this time, and heck, even throw in some open turns. So we slowed her warm up down. When she kicks, she stayed in the 10 beats per breath. If she was doing freestyle, she could, if she wanted to do butterflies, she could go to 4 beats per breath and breaststroke 2 cycles. And then on her pull, she again encouraged her to slow down tremendously and to see if she could flirt with pulling some 7s in there. All right, still warm up, not meant to be working hard. So I wanted the 7s to feel easy. Okay, the main set. She started with a 400 and we dropped down to 50s. The 400 was to breathe 5-7 by 50s at a moderate pace. Okay, this was the hardest part. All right, 5-7 was challenging for her. She was able to do it, but she had to play with her pace. She, by default, would go much more than moderate. She wasn't good at swimming slower, but she had to learn to kind of just get efficient so that she could maintain that breathing pattern. We descended that down then to kick sprints. So it's not that we pulled sprinting out. We just got really strategic with when she did sprint. Then she had 2 200s pull. So this was easier than the first one. The first one, she breathed 7.5 by 100. So 7 breaths per stroke on the first 100, 5 on the second. Hardest part done. The second 200, she just got to, breathe as she wanted. All right. If she wanted to go back to 2 or 3, she could. And what you find with people and you'll find with yourself is you don't. All right. You may not stay at the 7. All right. But you'll come back and you'll do mostly 5s with occasional 3. Very different than her 2 every time. And then she had 850s kick, which was just using that breathing pattern that she'd been doing, which wasn't very hard for her. And so now she would sprint doing it. She did a cleanup set of 12, 25, no breathers, all right, doing the Zen 25s. And that was the effect we got. So it was the first couple ones would feel a little bit hard and then got easier after that. Not easy, just a little bit easier. And then the cool down 100, we call it a creative float. That's a typical cool down for a swimmer, which is sort of silly. It's very short. And most of the time swimmers do 100 cool down, which really just means pulling on the lane rope for a 50 and talking at the end for a while. And so I told her she could do that. But we ended it all with a 2-minute meditation. And the reason we did the meditation at the end is after doing this kind of work, you'll find your body's ability to settle is really much better. And so we want to capitalize on that time. There's also something really nice about the pressure of the water. So the water is pressing in on your diaphragm, which actually helps you neurologically. And so by just standing in the water, maybe sinking down to shoulder height, letting the eyes close, and just feel what it is to return to pure diaphragmatic breathing with little to no movement in the chest is a really sweet feeling. We likely have a little bit of a serotonin bump from the work we've done. So we want to capitalize on that. We want to kind of take that and ride that wave instead of just rushing off, getting in the car and getting on, with your day. We want to connect to that biochemical cascade that has happened and be in it, even if it's just for 2 minutes. So the effect we got 4 weeks later, after doing this, I didn't retest the Nijmegen, so I'm not sure what that was. She moved in her nose breathing tolerance from light activity to heavy activity, which was awesome. And all she did was work more nose breathing in during the day. We didn't hound this like I do with the runners that I worked with, where that becomes a big part. And she just stayed in nose breathing. So even though she was mouth breathing her head off during swimming, her nose breathing tolerance improved. Beautiful increase in lateral rib excursion. Again, I did no physical therapy with her to improve it. Not that you can't, and not that that's not beneficial, but this is a good example of if we just change the neurological pattern and force diaphragm to play more, we get a musculoskeletal change in what it let happen for that excursion. I don't know if this is a clinically significant change in Bolt score. She went from 15 to 17. Most of us know that's a slow number to change. Probably significant, I'm not sure. The CO2 tolerance test, likely a significant change from 30 seconds to 45 seconds. Still not exactly where we'd like, for someone her level, we'd like to see that increase, but for 4 weeks, not bad. She didn't hit the 35, but she got close to 34 in terms of CO2 level, and her recovery from overbreathing, probably the most encouraging of all these, dropped from more than 2 minutes down to 30 seconds. So there's all signs saying that things are moving in the right direction for her. I would be content for her to stay right where she was in terms of intensity. She was as well. Not to say we won't pick it up later and play more in the phase 3, but she continues to play mostly in the phase 2 work. In preparation for this talk, I called her up and just asked her, 9 months now later, what has stuck with you? Conditioning myself, or I should say prepping myself for a person to come back, which does happen sometimes, and say, oh, I've completely forgotten about it and I haven't done anything with it. Got myself ready for that as a possible answer and was pleasantly surprised to hear that's not actually what she said. And the first thing she said was, what has stuck in this time since we stopped working together after the first 4 weeks was that overall, she's got this belief and this appreciation that what she does with her breath matters throughout all parts of her life. She does intentional breathwork challenge stuff once a week. So she really does push herself. into the 7s and 9s. She's comfortable in a 5-7 pattern, which is very different than her 2 pattern when we started. So she held on to that. And she said, mostly she just feels stronger in the water, which is really what she wanted. Was she just, when she started, she had this sense that things were going the wrong direction. And it is not so much the time that moves her. What really moves her to stay training and being in the water is just this sense of strength in the water. And she felt like she had that back. So in summary, 2 slides, and we'll get plenty of time for questions. I want to circle back to the circle. Okay. And that's this idea that this hypercapnia, this hypoxia, I think is really powerful stuff to play with. And so we go through this pattern of having awareness around the breath, playing in the world of comfortable breath holding challenges. And if we want, hitting those challenging stuff, all for the sake of coming back to number 4, which is really number 1, which is just having an enhanced experience around that awareness of breath. If we play in the phase 3 world, we know there's importance around doing things that are interesting to the person, or that they have an interest that they're willing to do, that they have an ability to do it, and that we get it dosed correctly. And there's at least some basic level, science out there helping give some guide rails on true phase 3 things, how to dose them in terms of too much, too little. The resources I promised you I apologize, we had a website snag that happened yesterday. I had hoped to be able to just give you a link to a document that you could get into. As it is, you've got 2 steps to do to get the document on the Breathe Your Truth website. If you go to breatheyourtruth.com and register, if you're fancy, you can hit /registration. It'll take you to a registration page. If you register, the next page that should pop up will be one that has got some featured content. There's a link there for Swim True, which is what will get you into the web page that has the criteria, the activities, and there's 3 sample workouts for the 3 phases. In fact, let me take you there right now and show it to you. Let me see if I can get there. So I'm gonna have to do a little gymnastics here, but it might be nice to show you the page if I can get there. And it's working. All right, let me change my share. And so just real quickly, this is the page. Can everybody see that? It says Swim True. You can just give me a thumbs up sign. Lucas, can you see that? Okay, great, great. All right, so on this page, really simple page, we've got the workouts. There's the find your lane, the test yourself. That's the criteria that I was talking about. If you pop that open, you'll see a PDF that's got the grid with the metrics on it. Then also on that page are activities. This is just a text description of the fair game for phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 activities. And then there are sample workouts for those. All right. So again, yeah.
Typo on your word muscle.
Ah, thank you. Where is that? Oh, there, look, there it is. Yeah, thank you. If you see any other typos, feel free to pass those on to me. All right. And so let's break for questions. That is what I have for you. Thank you for those. If you bug out before I get a chance to say thank you at the end, thank you a ton for your attention. And let's open the floor to questions.
All right, I'm going to ask another humming question. Do you know if there's any evidence based on the exhale in the humming versus inhale through your mouth? So could I inhale in the mouth and exhale through nose and still get the same nitric oxide benefits?
Yeah, I may tap into Lucas on this. My understanding of it is the more the air moves in and out through the nose, the better the nitric oxide production. I don't know, it might be that it's a little less if you're breathing in through your mouth. I'm not sure. Lucas, do you have any insight on that? Lucas, sorry.
Actually, we get that question a few months ago with Patrick. And I know some people is saying that if you hum through your nose and then, it's much better, as we know, to inhale and exhale through your nose while you hum, you make the humming.
Yeah.
That's what we know until now. Just nose breathing, much better than mouth breathing in any of or in the inhale or exhalation.
Yeah. And it makes sense, Jamie, too, because it's actually the inhale that brings the nitric oxide into your lungs. And so you want to do that inhale through your nose because it brings the air through the nasal passages. That's what gets it into the lungs. I think let's say in and out through the nose is going to be your best bet.
Yeah, actually, just singing can improve nitric oxide, but humming with the mouth closed, I think, accumulates more than any kind of vibration.
Yeah.
I don't know if I might ask a question regarding biking and running. I'm a triathlete.
Mm-hmm.
And I started nasal breathing according to the oxygenic advantage method, plus Aerofit, the breathing device you probably know, about 1.5 years ago. And right now, every running session, whether it is in the highest pulse zone, and every bike session, whether it is in the highest or the lowest pulse zone, I'm doing nasal breathing.
So you're able to tolerate it even in those extreme zones.
Yeah.
How do you feel with that?
Great.
Yeah.
So once I was on my Wahoo trainer, this turbo trainer. I did an all-out session, and I was used to nasal breathing. And I had a pulse of, let's say, 90% of my maximum. And I said to myself, because I was used to it decades before, why shouldn't I change again to mouth and nasal breathing at the same time? I did that for 5 seconds, and my thighs immediately shut up. And I changed immediately backwards to only nasal breathing. But I wonder, I'm feeling great, but I'm a bit irritated because I haven't heard about this from others in the competition area. And I wonder, although I'm feeling great and I haven't got any disadvantages, on the contrary, if there might be disadvantages in the future, I don't know.
Disadvantages of staying in nasal breathing during the intense part? Is that your question?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to it, but I'll tell you my experience with runners and many elite runners that I've worked with. I just worked with 7 who ran in Tokyo. And what I generally tell them is, they're nose breathing during training. And we're building up tolerance to nose breathing in training. But I tell them there will be points in your training that you should be pushing hard enough that you fall out of nose breathing. And then I also tell them in race, I don't care what you do. All right. I want you just to run. All right. Do what feels comfortable, but lose the voice in your head, of me saying, stay in nose breathing. And what most of them have come back saying, which always kind of scares the bejesus out of me, is they say, I stayed in nasal breathing for the entire race. And
they were Olympians in Tokyo marathon?
Not marathon, but yeah, there was some 1500 meter in there. There was one of them. Yeah. So of different distances.
Yeah.
And so, a marathon runner, you sort of could see staying in that. But when you start to get to those shorter distances, I don't know the answer to that, but I will tell you that I've got people coming back to me saying, I know you told me I didn't have to stay in nose breathing, but I did because I felt better with it. So they kind of echo your experience with it as well. Still, it just makes sense to say that on game day, the game is different. So while training, you're trying to expose yourself to CO2 and build up tolerance. When game time comes, you've done your work. Now you want to keep CO2 at bay so that you don't have anything telling your body that it has to breathe more if you can help it. All right, but I think everybody individually gets to try it and see how you feel with it.
Are there any studies in competitive endurance sport regarding nasal breathing, for instance, in cycling and or running?
Well, I don't know if it's specifically for cycling and running, but we have a study from Thomas, remember his last name, from 2009, that he discovered that the people can get 90% of his more hard exercise using the nose. I can share that with you if you want.
Yeah, please. Yeah. Can anybody share the same experience?
Yeah, I'd echo the same on that. So I can probably work at sort of 90% of my max sort of capacity now. Whether it's on a bike, a rower, anything really. And
you are feeling good with your nasal breathing doing those maximum kind of all-out sessions?
Obviously, it'd be easier to shift to nose-mouth or mouth-mouth, but when I'm just in terms of like trying to get a training adaptation, I can keep it there. And obviously at the highest intensities, it does get hard, but it's manageable.
And coming back to swimming, David, where you are more, because you are more into swimming, during those interval breaks, let's say 10 times 100 free, let's say 15 seconds rest. If I begin to talk to somebody, meaning I need my mouth, and after that, my breath is worse because the system changes. If I keep my mouth shut in the rest in between, the system is much better, and my performance is much better. Is that something you also experience with your athletes or yourself? Or?
Oh, absolutely. And we see it every day. We've got the Capno trainer out, that technology. When people talk, generally their carbon dioxide drops. Now, it doesn't have to be that way. I've worked with a couple of comedians and musicians where, because they perform that way, they actually need to get good at regulating CO2 even when they talk. And so you can train yourself to do it, but guaranteed, most of us, when we talk, we blow off CO2 more than what we would in normal breathing. Again, you can train yourself to it. If you've ever gotten a headache after giving a talk or just felt, chemically unwell, it's usually because you've moved yourself into low CO2 and you've held yourself there for a long period of time, and that's not comfortable. You don't feel well from it.
Hey, David, going back to the pre-race stuff, you talked about the shark fit. When I was reading about, spleen dumping and, it was a mixed window of how long that could be. But you're saying the shark fit would allow the spleen dump, or would you need a maximum, a longer breath hold to do that?
People are reporting it in 5 rounds of the shark fits, which is, that'd be about the same as 5 25s done the way we described, of holding, sprinting on a breath out for the first 15.
So you're getting the full spleen dump with that protocol?
I don't know if you're getting full. Yeah, I don't know that you're getting. Yeah.
How would the deep water divers? What is their protocol before?
You want to speak to that, Lucas?
I'm sorry, I was answering the chat and I didn't hear the question, but if you can do it again, please.
Yeah, I think the question was, what do you do in the freediving world in terms of getting your body ready for performance? Would you do any shark fits before that?
Yeah, well, not shark fits before a competition, but definitely I do a lot of breath holds out of the water. I just spent like 3 months without any water. And then I went to just practicing in land. And then I went to the sea and I improved my performance. And I hear a lot of other freedivers during the pandemic in some countries where they didn't have access to the pool, and they maintained their condition just doing breath holds out of the water during that time. And definitely before and after the diving, I use a lot of nose breathing. And now I'm like with my instructors, because I have some of my instructors that are free divers, to introduce nose breathing to recovery in the pool. I mean, after a breath holds, a dive in the pool, trying to use the nose to recover. Going deep in outdoor is completely different. And of course, this is just something like we're just observing now. So I don't recommend it now because I'm just trying with myself and other students that are willing to do it. But definitely, nitric oxide, the function of the nose to improve gas exchange must be a game changer on this. And before a competition or something, I do a lot of light breathing, LSD breathing, and humming, a lot of humming. And that really, really works for me. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, James.
Moral of the story is humming. All right, so we are right at a minute before. So let me extend a sincere and huge thanks to everyone who's been on the call, and to Oxygen Advantage for giving me this platform to talk. I'll stay on if people have got questions. If you feel free to email me if you've got questions. My email is david@breatheyourtruth.com. There's an E in breathe. And I apologize for the snag with the website. We'll get that fixed by the end of the day. And if worst case scenario, if you email me, I will just send you a link to get you in.
Great.
So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, David, for being here, for taking the time. It was an amazing masterclass. I learned a lot, and I will start using your advice and all this information. Thank you, everyone. We are creating these classes like every month to give you the best of the science behind the breath. So thank you for being part of the Oxygen Advantage community. And please breathe through your nose and be scientist of yourself. Breathing is all about finding the answers in yourself. So thank you so much, everyone. Follow the Oxygen Advantage in the social media. You can take a photo of this meeting, post it, and we will make the breathing famous again. Okay? So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.